Hello, this is Chris Goldthorpe. I hope you've become a subscriber by now. And I'm doing a series of videos that are intended for after-school enrichment programs. There are 3 lessons so far. The first one is just the chessboard. Lesson 2 is the notation, the names of the squares. And Lesson 3 involved the concept of check, checkmate, and stalemate, and went over the moves of the rook and the king. So at this point we need to meet the rest of the players, know their names, see what they look like in 3D and in diagram form, and know how they move. So let's take a look at the pieces. Here are the pieces in 3D. You may want to say what this looks like. What kind of piece is this? I hope we know how to spell it. That is a rook. In some schools you may want to learn the rook in another language as well. R-O-O-K, rook, starting with an R. Okay, this piece, the one with a point on the top, starts with a B, is a bishop. Now, there's a piece that can move like a rook or a bishop. This one, the second tallest piece, and that's the queen. The tallest, the largest piece, the game that the game is all about is the king. And the one that looks like a horse is a knight. Now, this is not accidental. I made the K small and the N big for a reason you'll see soon. And then there's the pawn. There's a pawn. So, how do these pieces move? I'm going to show you here, and then I'm going to go back to a two-dimensional board and show you how they move as well. So, the rook moves horizontally and vertically. Now this board is tilted a little bit in our perspective, but the rook can move backwards or forwards vertically, and he can move horizontally as well. So the rook can move 1 square forward. He can move to any of these squares here. He can move to this square, this one, this one, this one, this one, or this one. On a completely empty board, a rook has 14 choices from any square. And that was the rook. The bishop moves diagonally only. So this bishop can go to here, or to here, or he can move to any of these squares, or to this one, but the rook cannot move horizontally or vertically ever. So whatever color square a bishop is on, it will always travel on those squares of that color. The bishop can go forwards or backwards diagonally. Now the queen can move like a rook, so it can go horizontally or vertically. It could also move like a bishop, which means it can move diagonally. So the queen can move like a rook or a bishop. The rook moves horizontally and vertically like a capital T or a plus sign. The bishop moves diagonally only like an X or a times sign. The queen can move in any straight line direction like a rook or a bishop. The king also can move in any direction. However, he can only move one square at a time. So this king can only go to these squares right beside him. One square at a time. You can move in any direction the queen can go, but only one square at a time. The knight is complicated, and it takes a little bit of getting used to, even for adults. Whatever color square the knight is on, he's going to move to a square 2 king steps away and the opposite color. He's going to make a move to a square of the opposite color. Some people like to use the idea of a 2-in-1 L shape, but the knight doesn't move along a path. He hops directly to that square. So even if he is completely surrounded by squares of his own color or the enemy's pieces, he hops to his square. So this knight on a black square could move to this square. He could move to this square. He can move to this one. That's this knight here. He can move to this square. He can move to this one. He can move to this one. Now there'd be a square over here if he was closer to the middle, or over here, and you can go to this corner square here. Okay, so you have the rook, which moves horizontally or vertically. The bishop, which moves diagonally only. The queen can move horizontally or vertically like a rook, or it can move diagonally like a bishop. The rook, the bishop, and the queen can jump over any number of empty squares. So they can go all the way from one side of the board to the other in a single move, as long as nothing is in the way. All the pieces can go backwards except the pawn. Now the pawn simply moves one square forward. That's it. He moves to the square in front of him, directly toward the opponent. So if we're looking at it from white's side of the board, white's pawns go forward, and black's pawns go forward toward you. On a pawn's first move, and we'll know it's his first move because he'll be where all the pawns were when they start. On his first move, if he wants to, he can move forward 2 squares. So he has a choice of 1 or 2 if both of these squares are empty. The pawns cannot capture moving straight ahead. A pawn may not move diagonally unless it captures. So this is the confusing thing about pawns. Unlike all the other pieces, they move one way when they capture and a different way when they don't. Okay, so let's look at these on a 2-dimensional board. Here's the rook, the bishop, the queen, the king, the knight, the pawn. The queen can move like a rook, forwards and backwards or side to side. It can move vertically or horizontally. The queen could also move like the bishop. The queen can move diagonally. So it can go in any direction formed by a line between the square it's on and a square right next to it. The queen cannot make a knight move, not in one move. So the queen can move like a rook. So do we remember how the rook moves? The rook moves to the left, or to the right, or forwards, or backwards. The bishop moves diagonally only. So the bishop could choose any one of these squares and move there in one move, but it cannot jump over anything. And we want this line here. No. We want this line here to be a black one. There. Now the queen can move like a rook or a bishop. And if this is the first time you're seeing this, even if you're an adult, this could be a little difficult because there are 6 different kinds of pieces. So the queen can move like a rook, or the queen can move like a bishop. The king can move to a square that's next to him only. So here's the king's area. He can move to any of these squares here. He can move here, 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 and he can move here. Now, there is a video on this YouTube channel called How to Play Chess, and it is a consolidation of all of the other videos that explain how pieces move and various rules about how to get a draw, which we haven't gotten to yet. But at this point, you should be able to recognize the name of each piece and to know how it moves. So, do we remember how the knight moves? You see the 2-in-1 way of thinking here? See, 1, 2, 1. But the knight doesn't move that way. So he moves directly from here to, for example, from here to here in one move. This knight could go to here. This knight can go to here. Here, 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 or here. Now, if you haven't seen Lichess, you may want to see Lichess because it has something that shows us how these pieces move. So, learn chess basics. Okay, here is the rook. The rook can go straight ahead, straight backwards, or straight to the side. Moves along straight lines. Okay, see, so like if he wanted to go to both of these squares, he'd have to go to this one first, and then he'd be able to go here on the next move. Of course, he can't make 2 moves in one turn. Now, if I want to get to all 3 of these in 3 moves, it wouldn't make sense to go here first, because then whichever one I go to next, it would take 2 more moves to get to the other one. So I can go here first, and then the next time it's my move, go here, and then black makes some move. You know, if there's a game in progress with other white and black pieces on the board, and then possibly on my next move I can go here. So this should be enough for now for us to understand how the rook moves. Here, let's say he goes here, then here, Okay, so this should be enough for us to know how the rook moves. Let's see, this will be the last one of these that I do, because I know you guys want to try to play chess. Okay, so let's go to the bishop. We should know what the bishop looks like in live physical form, you know, your chess pieces, and also what he looks like on a diagram. So the bishop moves diagonally only, forwards or backwards, but diagonally only. Let's see, how could this guy get to all of these in a minimum number of moves? All right. Okay, so that was the bishop. Okay, the queen can move like a rook or like a bishop. So this queen can move here like a rook, and then he can move here like a bishop. If you wanted to get to all these squares, let's see, you could go here, then here, then here, and then here. Okay, so you get the idea. Let's see how the king moves. That's going to be a review from lesson 3. We should know how the king moves. The king moves one square at a time. So it would take a king 3 moves to get to this square, to get from 3 to 6. There were many ways that he could have gotten there in 3. Okay, so we know how the king moves. We should know that from the previous lesson. Now the knight is a little bit harder for people. I'm going to tell you 3 rules to help you remember how the knight moves. The knight can never move like a queen. It cannot move like any other piece. There is no piece except the knight that moves like a knight. The knight does not move along in a path along the chessboard. He jumps from a starting square to an end square. So he will never move to a square that's right beside him. Remember that. Remember also that every time the knight moves, whatever color square he's on, the next move will put him on the opposite color. So if he starts on a white square, he's going to move to a black square. There will always be exactly 2 moves, or 2 squares between the starting square and the ending square for a knight. So when he goes from here to here, these 2 squares are in the middle. If we thought of the 2 and 1 L shape, see 2 and 1 or 1 and 2. If we thought of the 2 and 1 from here, it would see like 2 and 1. But the knight moves directly. The square he goes to is always exactly 2 king moves away. Okay, so let's see how the knight grabs all these. Now there's a whole video on this channel that shows you in more detail and talks about the knight's move a little bit more. Let's see, I should have gone back and done it a different way. Go to the knight again. Now you should be able to guess ahead of time where the knight is going to go next. Okay, this is the one where I should have gone to this one first, so I can go to all the rest of them in 1 move each. Okay, so the move of the pawn, there's a whole nother video here, both in how to play chess and also how the pawn moves. The pawn move video is like 5 minutes long because there are some different things about how it moves. So the pawn's basic move is he just moves 1 forward, one at a time. When he gets to the back row, he must promote. That means change into, transform himself into a different type of piece. He cannot become a king and he cannot remain a pawn. So his choices are queen, rook, knight, or bishop. And so you can guess, I hope, which piece a person would normally need to promote to. Here, he will promote to a queen or a bishop in order to get here next. Okay, now if he's going to get to all these squares, he's going to have to end up becoming a queen, or actually, yeah. And then we'll go. Oh, you know what? He could have become a knight there, and then he could have gone to all these others. Yeah, let's do that. So the first one goes here, becomes a queen. Of course, you can't make more than one move at a time. And in between your move in a real game, your opponent's going to get to move. Okay, this time we'll make him a knight. Then he goes here, then here, then here, then here, then here. Okay. So at this point, we should recognize and know the names of all of the pieces, which single capital letter represents it, in particular an N for knight, K for king. Otherwise, it's simply the first letter, and a pawn is not represented with a capital letter. We'll learn more about that on how to do chess notation. There are some videos on this channel about how to do chess notation, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate for your class yet, depending on the age and advancement of the players. So, at this point, we should know how all of the pieces move. The queen can move like a rook or a bishop. The rook goes horizontally or vertically. The bishop moves like a diagonally. The king goes one square in any direction. The knight goes to the nearest opposite colored square that is not right next to it. The nearest opposite colored square that is not right next to it. The pawn goes one at a time, straight ahead. He can only go diagonally to capture, and he can only go diagonally if he captures. He can only capture diagonally. He cannot capture going straight ahead. He cannot move diagonally without capturing. On his first turn, he could move one or two. That's the only time he has the option. When the pawn gets to the back row, he has the obligation of promoting and takes on the powers of that piece immediately, but that's the end of his move, and then it is the other person's turn. So, make sure that you saw lesson 3 on check, checkmate, and stalemate, and in future lessons we may be talking about different ways that the game could be a draw. I'm going to tell you the 1946 version of the values of the pieces. In that setup, a knight or a bishop is worth 3 pawns. So if a pawn would be 1, knight or a bishop is 3. The rook, 5, and the queen, 9. That evaluation system would be improved by calling the queen 10. And later on we'll learn what the updated, more correct version of it is, though it is a little more complicated. Okay, so this should be enough for you to be able to start playing chess with your teacher's help, provided they know how to play chess. And please do like and subscribe, and we will see you next in lesson 5.